Steelers and the Browns. That brings us then to our NFL segment. Howard Balzer, longtime NFL scribe, is our guest. You can follow him at USA Today Cards Wire and also on X or Twitter at HBalzer721. Howard, the setup for the Cardinals and Seahawks, Seattle. First really bad weather game, it appears, for the Cardinals. Sideways rain is in the forecast in Seattle. How does that change the outlook, or does it change the outlook for you?
Yeah, I guess anytime you play in something you're not accustomed to, you can have potentially some issues with that. Obviously, the Seahawks are accustomed to, playing in that type of weather. And, of course, they've had other distractions this week with that bomb cyclone that hit the Western Washington area on Tuesday night. Winds up to 75 miles an hour knocked out the power in their facility, and they've been meeting and doing things with generators. But, yeah, I think that it certainly can affect the passing game, especially if obviously if it's raining sideways, that means there's wind. And it's the wind more than the rain a lot of times that will affect things. And that can affect the kicking game too. But, certainly when it comes down to that, though, even if you're accustomed to it, it's still going to affect things. So I'm not sure how much it favors the Seahawks, if that much. Certainly both teams like to run the ball, and that's going to be, I would think, a big part of that game. So, we'll see how it all plays out and what that weather is. But, they know. Certainly everybody knows what it's going to be like in Seattle, but it's another thing when you get out there and have to play a game. And as loud as it'll be for the Cardinals, that'll be another thing that, they'll have to contend with.
And I think if you're a Seattle fan, you're still wondering, well, who are the Seahawks? What are they? Where the Cardinals, I think, have finally, after 10 games, winning the last 4 in a row, have discovered their identity. You mentioned running the ball very well. Kyler Murray doesn't really have to be an all-pro hero every game. Their defense is playing very well. Their front seven, their third down conversions. I mean, they're finally starting, I think, to come into their own, which I think in that kind of conditions would favor the Cardinals because of those elements I just talked about.
Yeah, it very well could. And the thing about it, the one thing that the Cardinals have been, really good at with all the different things we've talked about is protecting the football. They don't make an inordinate number of turnovers. Except for the bad game in Green Bay, they're still, even with that bad game on penalty-wise, they're one of the fewest penalized teams in the NFL. And they've had very minimal number of pre-snap penalties. Not a lot of false starts. Well, you hope that something like that doesn't happen. So, yeah, I think the Cardinals certainly are playing better football than the Seahawks overall over this last month, although certainly the Seahawks gained some, confidence with the come from behind win over the 49ers, which now, both teams can say they did against the 49ers coming from behind to win a game late. And so, I don't know. If it's a slight advantage to the Cardinals, could be, but, it still comes down to making those plays when you have to in games. And we'll see what this looks like. But, the last 2 games, obviously, the Cardinals played weren't very competitive in the second half. I would suspect that this game will be different, but then again, you just never know how a game is going to go in the NFL.
Howard, as you rattle off those common denominators on the offense defensive side, what's the facility like when you visit it now versus last year? Is it a kind of a quiet confidence, all business? Is it just kind of a tone of where they're at right now versus last year?
It's interesting you ask that, because even during seasons when they were losing, which was last year, and you could see that the team was even playing better, even though they weren't winning a bunch of games. But even the season before that, I don't see a tremendous amount of difference. And granted, we're not there a lot, obviously. We're able to see 20 minutes of practice on a normal day, and then we're in the locker room on 3 days for about 45 minutes when 75% of the players aren't even in the locker room. So, but the thing that I've seen and taken note of is we all know the type of culture that Jonathan Gannon is trying to build. And his message to the team is always very similar, with all the different cliches or whatever you want to call them that he has. Control what you can control. Keep the main thing the main thing. Today is the most important day in terms of trying to get better. The thing that you really see is the players all say the same thing. They basically repeat all the things that Gannon says. Not Gannon only says it to us, but he says it to them too. And so I think that's the one thing that's clear is that this team is on the same page. But you still have to win games, and they're winning close games. Certainly the last two weren't, but before that they had 3 games decided by a total of 4 points. And I remember, guys, we might have talked about it, but there was a lot of talk after that one home win. I think it was against I'm trying to remember if it was the Chargers or whichever one it was, where they made a big deal of James Conner, who gave a talk to the team the night before and talked about taking advantage of your opportunities and things like that. And so, of course, we talked about that because they won the game, a very close game. If they hadn't won, nobody would have talked about James Conner's speech the night before. So it still comes down to, making those plays to find ways to win in the fourth quarter, because that's where most of the games are decided in the National Football League.
Howard Balzer is our guest on the Right Toyota guest line. Howard, when the season began, did you think that the NFC West was going to be a jumbled mess the way that it is right now? Or did you see somebody like the 49ers having control of it and then the other 3 teams fighting for a spot?
I certainly thought the 49ers would have control of the division. There was no reason to think before the season that they wouldn't. I mean, this is a team that's been in the Super Bowl, a very talented roster. But then again, you can't predict that you're not going to have Christian McCaffrey for basically the first half of the season, that you're going to lose. Brandon Ayuk was a long holdout, and then he gets hurt. And then Nick Bosa is in and out of the lineup. And here's the thing about it, guys. I always talk about the close games the Cardinals are involved in. I just mentioned 2 last-minute losses that the 49ers have had. And they also had one earlier in the season against the Rams, where they had a 10-point lead going into the final 2 minutes, and the Rams scored a touchdown to tie. I'm sorry, a 7-point lead. They scored a touchdown to tie, and then kicked the field goal with 2 seconds left to win. And then we had the last second losses in the division, of course, to the Cardinals and the Seahawks. And I always say, guys, flip 2 of those games that the 49ers lost. They're 2-4 in one-score games. Flip 2 of them, and all of a sudden they're 7-3.
Yes.
And no one's wondering what's wrong with the 49ers.
Right.
But again, that's the separator in the NFL. I mean, the Cardinals, after the early season one-score losses to Detroit and Buffalo, they were 2-7 in one-score games under Jonathan Gannon. And they're sitting there at 2-4, and everybody's saying, same old Cardinals, right? Well, now in the one-score games they've had since then, they're 3-0. Mm-hmm. If they lost 2 of those close ones, they'd be 4-6, and no one would be very excited as you head into this stretch of the schedule. So that, again, all I'm saying, that's what separates teams in the NFL, win or lose, and those are the games you have to win consistently if you're going to be a playoff team. And certainly, I would expect in these final 7, who knows how many
break whenever,
but I would suspect a majority of them will be one-score games.
Always good, pal, when you take time with us. Great information. Have a great weekend, Howard. Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care. Same
there
to
you go. You got it. Howard Balzer, everybody. Once again, it is USA Today Cards Wire and on X at HBalzer721. All right, a quick break. When we come back, we'll get you up to speed. What's on television tonight? Some results of today's State 48 Roofing. It's your call. Question of the day, and even a little football at 50. Rock and Minutes with